เราจะได้พบกับวิทยากรท่านแรกแล้วนะครับเรียนเชิญทุกท่านที่ห้อง Space Convention Center ได้เลยครับขอบคุณครับ ค สวัสดีครับสวัสดีแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านนะครับขอต้อนรับทุกท่านเข้าสู่งานสัมมนา Thailand Cybersecurity 2017 ครับ Cybersecurity for all ความมั่นคงปลอดภัยไซเบอร์เพื่อทุกคนครับผมทศธรรมเปี่ยมสมบูรณ์ได้รับเกียรติเป็นพิธีกรในงานครั้งนี้ครับ So good morning ladies and gentlemen welcome everyone to the seminar of the Thailand Cybersecurity 2017 Cybersecurity for all My name is Todd I'm absolutely privileged to be your master of ceremony for todayการสัมมนาในครั้งนี้นะครับจะขับเคลื่อนให้คนไทยทุกคนได้รับความรู้ความเข้าใจในระบบดิจิทัลและสภาพแวดล้อมออนไลน์ครับงานในครั้งนี้นะครับก็ถือว่าเป็นปรากฏการณ์ครั้งยิ่งใหญ่เลยซึ่งเป็นการรวมตัวกันเพื่อแลกเปลี่ยนประสบการณ์รับมือภัยคุกคามระดับประเทศเลยทีเดียวนะครับซึ่งวันนี้นะครับทุกท่านก็จะได้รับเกียรติจากวิทยากรมากมายและก็ได้ความรู้นะครับอย่างเต็มอิ่มเลยเกี่ยวกับโลกดิจิทัลของเราเพราะว่าทุกวันนี้นะครับเรากำลังก้าวเข้าสู่ยุคดิจิทัลครับไม่ว่าจะเป็นเรื่องของอีคอมเมิร์ซและก็หลายๆเรื่องเลยนะครับตลอดทั้ง5วันนะครับเราได้รับเกียรติจากสปีกเกอร์ทั้งในประเทศและนานาประเทศนะครับที่จะหมุนเวียนให้ทั้งความรู้ความเข้าใจเพื่อสร้างความรู้และความเข้าใจนะครับในโลกไซเบอร์รวมถึงความเชื่อมั่นในระบบรักษาความปลอดภัยทั้งทางไซเบอร์ภายใต้นโยบายเศรษฐกิจดิจิทัลครับและสำหรับทุกท่านที่มาในงานในครั้งนี้นะครับถ้าท่านอยากได้ข้อมูลไม่ว่าจะเป็นในเรื่องของ Agenda ตลอดทั้ง5วันเลยตั้งแต่วันนี้นะครับถึงวันที่30มิถุนายนนี้ก็คือวันศุกร์นี้นะครับรวมถึงข้อมูลต่างๆและไฟล์ต่างๆจากวิทยากรของเราทุกท่านสามารถสแกน QR Code บนป้ายคล้องคอของท่านได้นะครับเพื่อที่จะได้รับข้อมูลทุกอย่างเกี่ยวกับ Cybersecurity Week 2017 ของเราเลยนะครับและแน่นอนนะครับวันนี้เราก็ต้องขอบคุณสปอนเซอร์ของเรามากมายนะครับที่มาเปิดบูธในงานนี้ด้วยนะครับเดี๋ยวอีกสักครู่เราจะกล่าวขอบคุณสปอนเซอร์ทุกสปอนเซอร์เลยครับและวันนี้เราก็มีกิจกรรมมากมายรวมถึงการจับรางวัลถึง2รอบด้วยครับเรามีทั้งหมด6รางวัลนะครับไม่ว่าจะเป็นwristband flash drive และก็หูฟังแบบ Bluetooth ด้วยนะครับซึ่งเดี๋ยวจะอธิบายกติกาในการจับรางวัลนั่นเองนะครับซึ่งจะเกี่ยวกับแบบกรอกของทุกท่านครับแต่ตอนนี้นะครับเพื่อเป็นการไม่เสียเวลานะครับผมขอเรียนเชิญคุณสุรังคนาวายุภาพผู้อำนวยการสำนักงานพัฒนาธุรกรรมทางอิเล็กทริกองค์การมหาชนให้เกียรติต้อนรับทุกท่านอย่างเป็นทางการขอเสียงปรบมือด้วยครับ
สวัสดีนะคะท่านแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านท่านวิทยากรที่เคารพนะคะเอ็ดดาลุกขึ้นมาทำเรื่อง Cybersecurity ปีนี้เป็นปีที่6นะคะชื่อของเอ็ดดานั้นทำเรื่องของโปรโมทอีคอมเมิร์ซโดยตรงในตอนเราแรกตั้งดิฉันได้เล่าให้ในหลายทีฟังว่าเราก็พบว่ารูบ้านเรานั้นเยอะเหลือเกินเยอะเสียจนทำใจไม่ได้ว่าจะโปรโมทอีคอมเมิร์ซแล้วรูมันเยอะขนาดนั้นจัดการรูก่อนดีกว่าไหมนะคะก็เป็นที่มาที่เอ็ดดา4 ปีแรกทุ่มเรื่องซีรีส์เต็มๆนะคะทำงานอยู่ข้างหลังแทบจะเรียกได้ว่าคนอื่นคงไม่ค่อยได้รู้มากนักว่าทำไมเอ็ดดาเหมือนกับชื่อตั้งขึ้นมาเพื่อโปรโมทอีคอมเมิร์ซ e-transaction แล้วทำไมมาเน้นเรื่อง security หลายคนคิดเลยเถิดไปถึงขนาดว่าภารกิจ ETDA เป็นหน้าที่ด้าน security โดยตรงหรือเปล่านะคะถ้าดูในโครงสร้างกฎหมาย ETDA เมื่อโปรโมท e-commerce ก็ต้องลดความเสี่ยงทางด้านไซเบอร์ไปด้วยนะคะแต่ปรากฏการณ์ทางสังคมที่น่าสนใจวันนี้เราต้องยอมรับว่า Cybersecurity ไม่ใช่เป็นเรื่องของการตั้งใจเจาะระบบแฮกระบบของอาชญากรรมหรืออาชญากรแต่เพียงเท่านั้นหรือของแฮกเกอร์แต่เพียงเท่านั้นเราพบว่ามันมีปรากฏการณ์ทางสังคมเป็นตัวแปรเพิ่มขึ้นมาด้วยเมื่อเราระแวงรัฐเราไม่พอใจรัฐบางทีเราก็ทำให้ระบบล่มเสียอย่างนั้นนะคะก็เป็นสิ่งที่ต้องระมัดระวังว่าจะต้องดูแลอย่างไรเพื่อให้เกิดความเข้าใจถูกต้องตรงกันให้ดีที่สุดเมื่อไม่นานมานี้เราได้เห็นปรากฏการณ์ WannaCry นะคะว่าเป็นปรากฏการณ์ของ malware หรือของ ransomware ตัวหนึ่งซึ่งพอเกิดขึ้นมาแล้วปั๊บมันกระทบทั่วโลกแล้วแพร่กระจายอย่างรวดเร็วนะคะเพราะมีลักษณะเป็นเวิร์มตัวหนึ่งประเภทหนึ่งก็โชคดีที่เราทุกประเทศทั่วโลกร่วมกันช่วยกันแก้ปัญหานะคะแต่ปรากฏการณ์ทำนองนี้มันช่วยสร้างความตระหนักเรื่อง Cybersecurity อย่างมหาศาลในประเทศเราอย่างไม่น่าเชื่อเหมือนวิกฤตทำให้เกิดปรากฏการณ์ที่เราตื่นตัวเรื่องนี้มากขึ้นอย่างมีพลังร่วมกันนะคะผู้นำของทุกประเทศรวมทั้งของประเทศเราเองก็ลุกขึ้นมาเตือนประชาชนในเรื่องเหล่านี้อันนี้คือสิ่งที่ ETDA ถึงได้จัดงานวันนี้ขึ้นมาแล้วก็ได้เชิญเอากูรูทั้งหลายนะคะไม่ว่าจะภายในประเทศเราเองหรือต่างประเทศมาแลกเปลี่ยนประสบการณ์กับพวกเราแล้วเราก็หวังว่าตัวเลข e-commerce ซึ่ง ETDA คาดหวังว่ามันจะโตแตะ 20% จากเดิมที่มันแตะประมาณ10%กว่าทุกปีจะเกิดความมั่นคงปลอดภัยก็เป็นเหตุผลสำคัญว่าทำไมเราถึงใส่ใจในเรื่องการให้ความสำคัญเรื่อง Cybersecurity ต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านที่มาร่วมงานในวันนี้นะคะและขอให้การดำเนินงานเป็นไปด้วยความเรียบร้อยขอบพระคุณค่ะ
ครับขอบพระคุณคุณสุรางคณาวายุภาพนะครับผู้อำนวยการสำนักงานพัฒนาธุรกรรมทางอิเล็กทรอนิกส์องค์การมหาชนครับผม So thank you very much to our first speaker who is our honorary guest for welcoming everyone and also talking about the purpose of the Cybersecurity Thailand 2017 as wellเอาละครับตอนนี้ก็ได้เวลาอันสมควรแล้วนะครับเราจะพบกับวิทยากรท่านแรกซึ่งเราจะมาดูกันว่าการร่วมกันรับมือภัยคุกคาม Cybersecurity จากทั่วโลกองค์กรและหน่วยงานต่างๆที่เกี่ยวข้องนะครับทำงานประสานสอดรับกันอย่างไรและแนวปฏิบัตินะครับที่เป็นที่ยอมรับในการร่วมกันรับมือต่อต้านภัยคุกคามทางไซเบอร์ครับครับซึ่งในโอกาสนี้นะครับเราจะขอเรียนเชิญสปีกเกอร์ท่านแรกนะครับที่จะพูดถึงหัวข้อ The New Threat Landscape The Stakes Have Changed ครับขอเรียนเชิญคุณ Philippe Alcoy Security Technologist APAC Arbor ขอเสียงปรบมือให้ท่านด้วยครับ So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Philippe Alcoy, Security Technologist APAC Arbor, our first speaker of the Thailand Cybersecurity Week 2017. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. Good, my cup. Can you hear me? Savadi cup. ชื่อ Philippe Alcoy ครับพูดภาษาไทยไม่ได้ครับ and that's exactly what happens when I say that to taxi drivers. They don't believe me. I'm going to switch to English, and I apologize in advance. I'm French, my dad's Spanish, and so you're not going to be able to understand anything I'm going to say because my accent is horrible. So I apologize in advance. I'm the security technologist for Asia-Pac at Arbor Networks, and I first like to thank the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society, ETDA and ThaiCert for inviting us. It's an honor. And in the next 40 to 45 minutes, probably a bit less, or who knows, maybe a bit longer, I'm going to be talking about how the distributed denial of services or DDoS attacks and cyber threat landscape have changed over the last 18 to 24 months. And how those changes have impacted risk organizations are today facing, but as well how those changes are actually shaping the way we today and the way we will in the future defend against cybersecurity attacks. So without further ado, let's dive right in, and let's hope that it's going to work. Yes, somewhere. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so first, what I like to do is take a step back just to understand where we're coming from and to understand as well the dynamics at play here. So people often talk about how the jet engine has made the world a smaller place 60, 70 years ago. But a similar and probably more current analogy would be about the connectivity that we use today. So our mobile phones, instant messaging platforms, and video and audio conferencing platforms, everybody can argue that they've made the world even smaller. And the big difference is that transformation happened within a much more compressed time period, just over 5 and 10 years. So that's a big difference. And everybody agrees, or at least I would assume everybody agrees, that during that same time period, the internet obviously has transformed humanity. And the internet has transformed not only who we are, but as well what we do. And so if we move on to the business side, many organizations today, and obviously it's everybody would agree with that, interact with customers, with partners, with suppliers, more in digital ways than they do in the physical form. And every business today, either small or large, is dependent on application services or data online that they use for the day-to-day business operation. And unfortunately, the primary threats to the availability and integrity of those services are distributed denial of services and cybersecurity attacks. So what I'd like to do now is spend the next 10 minutes or so talking a little bit about those changes and definitely make you aware of what we're seeing happening so that you could be all best prepared. So now, DDoS and cybersecurity attacks are nothing new. They've been around for well over 20 years. And during that time period, as you would expect, they've evolved. So why is Arbor talking about the stakes changing? Well, primarily it's because within the last 18 to 24 months, there's been a couple of big changes in this area. And the first one of those is that there are now a much broader range of organizations that are aware of DDoS and cybersecurity attacks, with adoption of cloud, mobility, software as a service, organizations are a lot more reliant on internet connectivity for their day-to-day business operation. And as such, they are looking for solutions and services to help them deal with the threats associated with those services. The second reason is more to do with the threat landscape itself. In the last 18 to 24 months, what we've seen is really a step change in the rate of evolution of those type of attacks. And I like to go into the next slide. So DDoS and cybersecurity attacks have been around for 20 years and more. So as you expect, they've evolved in terms of size, scale, in terms of frequency, and in terms of complexity. And going into the next slide, which here is data from Arbor Worldwide Infrastructure Security Report. So every year, Arbor goes out to the broad operational security communities with a survey to establish their observation, their experience of the current year, and their concern about the following year. And this data gets compiled into what is called the Worldwide Infrastructure Security Report, or WISER. This report is available free of charge. You can download it from our website. And last year, the largest attack reported to us by our survey respondents was up at 800 gigabit per second. And that was a jump from 60% from the previous year. And as you can see on those slides, the peak attack sizes from distributed denial of services have actually escalated pretty quickly within the last 2 years. So 800 gigabit per second is an awful lot of traffic. Pretty much any kind of organization around the world will struggle with this. Data centers will have issue with that, and even, in fact, some service providers will struggle to deal with an attack of such magnitude. It will cause congestion on their backbone and at various peering and tracing points on the network. But peak attack sizes are one thing, but probably average attack sizes are a lot more relevant for many of us. And those numbers are unfortunately also growing. So last year, peak attack sizes worldwide grew 23%. And they now stand at 100 gigabit per second. And that's quite important because most organizations in the world today do still have internet connectivity at or around the 1 gigabit per second thresholds. And so what that means, it means that there are now a whole lot of average DDoS attacks around the world that are well capable of saturating the internet connectivity of any organization in the world. And obviously when that happens, they cut off from the internet, they cut off from the services that they rely on for their day-to-day business operation. The 100 gigabit per second average DDoS attack size that we collected last year was actually double the number that we saw the previous year, which by itself as well was double the number that we saw in 2014. So when we talk about DDoS attacks, and definitely when we talk about those large attacks like the attack that we saw on the previous slide, or the attack that you might have heard of in the news that targeted Krebs, the journalist, or Dine in the US last year, what happens is that people tend to think to themselves, well, those only happen 3 to 4 times a year, and those aren't really something I need to be concerned about. And unfortunately, this is no longer the case. Sorry about that, went too fast. This is no longer the case. This data here comes from what is called Arbor Atlas system. And Atlas gives Arbor unique visibility into internet traffic patterns and the cyber threat landscape. Around 360 of our service provider customers do opt to share data with us on a hourly basis about the type of traffic they see going through their network boundaries and the type of attacks they see on their network. And last year, Atlas told us that we tracked over 500 DDoS attacks at over 100 gigabit per second. And what it means that there are every day, or on average, more than one large DDoS attack going on around the world every day. So those very large DDoS attacks are no longer black swan events. They are really becoming increasingly more popular and more common. So this is not something that you can't avoid anymore. So when we talk about those types of attacks, we tend, and definitely when we talk about those large ones, we tend to be talking about one specific type of DDoS, the ones that are called volumetric type of attacks. And those are the ones that the media focuses on the most. And the reason being is that they are fairly easy to explain. The numbers that come with those attacks are fairly large, and they're going up very quickly. So that makes them extremely newsworthy. But there are actually 2 other types of DDoS attacks that we need to be concerned about. The first one of those is TCP state exhaustion attack, which targets firewalls, load balancers, or any kind of infrastructure device on your network that maintain a lot of state. And the second one is called application layer DDoS attack. And then, as its name suggests, application layer DDoS attack are the ones that are target application servers, websites, APIs. And those types of attack are a lot more sophisticated. They're almost stealthy, a lot more complex to detect, and obviously a lot more complicated to as well mitigate. They tend to use traffic patterns that simulate or looks like an original or normal user, and so that makes them a lot more complicated to spot. And then, in the end, we've got another type. It's not really another type because it's actually all of them in one package. Those are the most complex type of distributed denial of services attacks. They're called multi-vector DDoS attacks. And as their name suggests, they're simply when an attacker decides to use multiple attack vectors against the same target at the same time. And those attacks are also growing. As you can see, 67%, so nearly above 2/3 of our service provider customers told us that last year they saw those very complex multi-vector DDoS attack on their network. So what's driving all of this? So there's multiple reasons. And maybe if we step back to 2012, 2013, maybe some of you might remember Operation Navabil. The Operation Navabil was a complex, long-lived DDoS campaign that targeted the North American financial sector. And the people behind this DDoS campaign really knew what they were doing. They were using multi-vector DDoS attack against their targets. They were creating botnets as they progressed. They were using their own attack tools. They were carrying out reconnaissance of their target and fine-tuning the type of attacks that they wanted to launch. And unfortunately, those campaigns, those attacks were successful. But the people behind those, the perpetrators, really knew what they were doing. So we're seeing here a proliferation of multi-vector DDoS attack on the internet right now. So the question is, does that mean that there are a lot more sophisticated people out there, attackers, on the internet? And to explain why we see an increase of multi-vector DDoS attack. And unfortunately, no. What we're seeing is what is called the weaponization of DDoS botnets. And those services are everywhere. They're very easy to find. At a click of a button, you can launch a very large volumetric attack against your target or a very complex multi-vector DDoS attack. It's very simple to do, it's very easy to use, and it's actually as well very cheap. And that brings an important point here, is the asymmetry that we see between the cost of running a DDoS attack and the cost of the impact of an attack. You can launch a DDoS attack today for as little as $5 per attack, whereas what we see mostly is that the cost of the impact of this attack could be well in the hundreds of thousands of $. And as you can guess, if you take anyone or your target's infrastructure offline for any amount of time, obviously there's going to be a cost associated with the loss of revenue. There's going to be operational costs as well, linked to bringing all the system back up. And that's not even including the damage to the brand reputation and as well the impact on your customer confidence. And unfortunately, and that's the interesting part of it, is that as everything on the internet, those weaponized DDoS for hire services even come with free trials. So in most cases, you don't even need to spend $5 to launch an attack. And this is exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing people that are just trying them out just to see how effective they actually will be. And most of the time, those people have actually no intention of paying for those services. What they are and what they do is they're just venting some frustrations or rage, hate against some organization or against someone with whom they've got an issue just across the internet. So weaponization of DDoS botnet is a big issue. And what that created is help or organization or make people, it made motivations for running DDoS attacks a lot easier. When we talk about DDoS, people think of extortion, and indeed extortion is still very well active. But we see as well a lot of ideological activism, for instance. We don't see the big nullsec or anonymous campaigns that we used to see, but we still see ideological activities around regional elections, or they could be actually national elections more recently, and as well around media disputes or geopolitical disputes. Another as well aspect that we see a lot is within gaming. We see that gamers are actually taking their games far too seriously. And gamers will try to look for revenge against someone about something that happened during a game online, or they'll be looking for some kind of unfair advantage against an opponent during a game. And unfortunately, they're turning to DDoS for doing this. And one of the big concerns that we're seeing around that is when you use DDoS for hire services, those weaponized services, in such a way, is that there could be a big, let's say, overkill of using these techniques. It's more than likely that you could have the same desired effect by sending just a few hundred megabits of data at your target. But by using those weaponized services, you might well end up saying a few hundred gigabit of traffic at the target. And unfortunately, some other users of this service around the target might actually feel the impact. If you target a game server online, for instance, and in a cloud or hosting environment, it's more than likely than other users of this cloud on this hosting service will definitely feel the impact and see a big change in the response time of those services. So that's called collateral damages. And even if that doesn't seem important, it is actually a growing concern for many service providers, application service providers today on the internet. And finally, we're seeing a new kind of motivation for DDoS. And DDoS being used as a smokescreen for other type of cybercrimes. So plainly, it's using DDoS to distract you during the malware infiltration on your network, or disguise the data that is being exfiltrated, the data that is being stolen from your network. So DDoS is used in that way. When you submerge a network with internet traffic, then suddenly you've got a lot of logs. All your incident handlers and security analysts are very busy and not looking at exactly what's going on from a targeted cyber threat attack. So weaponization of DDoS botnets are a big issue. And obviously, if you have a broad range of motivation, and there are motivations there, if you make something very simple to do, if you make it very easy to use, and obviously if you make it free, and for most of the time, most of the cases, this is actually free, if you got a lot of good reasons to do it, good or not good, if you got reasons to do it, what happens is that you see an increase of frequency of those type of attacks. And it's exactly what we're seeing. All our service providers, customers, enterprise customers, data centers, they all are telling us that they're seeing more and more distributed denial of services attack on their network than they've ever seen before. So if we take a parallel from the DDoS world to the advanced threat or cyber threat perspective, here there are some similarities and some differences. The first similarities are about the it's about the complexity here. If you remember, DDoS attacks are becoming more and more complex. It's exactly the same in terms of cyber attacks. Now, cyber attacks, on average, contain 7 or plus toolkits in one type of malware. So the complexity has increased. As we've already mentioned, 26% of cybersecurity attacks use DDoS as smokescreen. Now, if we draw another comparison and difference with DDoS, it's about the last 2 points here, is that though multi-vector DDoS attacks are getting more complex and are getting more difficult to detect and mitigate, you will very quickly, if you're the target of such an attack, you will quickly realize it. You will lose connectivity, or your services, your application services will be down. Whereas, and that's the big difference with cybersecurity attacks, is that cybersecurity attacks are actually a lot more invisible and a lot more difficult to detect. So there are multiple reasons, but 2 of the main ones is that, first, 44% of cybersecurity attacks use social engineering to get through. They don't use malware anymore. They don't need to infect anyone with any kind of malicious code. So it's a lot easier to get into someone else's network if you've got a valid username and password. And obviously, if you've got a malicious user logging into your network with valid credentials, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to detect it. So there's a cloak of invisibility there, which makes cybersecurity threats a lot more complicated. And the last one is that 60% of actually those attacks are carried out by insiders. They are insider jobs. And while most of the organizations today are getting better, but we're not there yet, and we'll talk a little bit about that, a lot of work and time, effort, and energy has been spent into protecting the network from outsiders. And the security, the threat landscape has never been looked at from an insider perspective. Now, let's look at some of the numbers here at the bottom, which actually relate to the complexity and the real challenge that incident handlers are facing today. The first one is probably the most scary of those, is that it takes about 9 minutes for any dedicated, sophisticated attacker to get into a network. For an intrusion, it takes about 9 minutes. And that's extremely fast. Why? It's because if you really want to be able to detect an intrusion, an incident, and contain the incident, you really need to work very, very fast. Unfortunately, the average dwell time for an attack is 200 days. So what is the dwell time? Is the time it takes for an attack or an incident to be detected, meaning that you get an intrusion, a breach of your network, you've got an intruder on your network. On average, it takes about 200 days for organizations across the world to detect that they've got someone on their network. So it's 200 days, it's plus or minus, but let's say it's about 6 months. And 6 months is a hell of a lot of time. During 6 months, you had someone on a network, someone installing new backdoors, doing reconnaissance, looking at data, looking at what they could steal, and trying to as well install some kind of persistence rootkit. And it's a long time. Considering as well that, so why, or considering this, an incident takes on average 3 days for 60% of enterprises. And obviously, I'm sure you're pretty familiar with incidents, but you get hundreds of incidents a day, and you need to triage them, you need to qualify them, and you only need to focus on the ones that do matter for your environment and are critical. But it takes, on average, 3 days to investigate an incident. So all of this makes the balance tipped not in our favor when we defend against cybersecurity attack. And I'll go back into that and why we got there and what we can do maybe to get better. Another interesting fact is that attackers, malicious users, they know that organizations have trouble detecting them and can't really mitigate and fix those issues. So they take their time. So once you've been breached, it takes on average 7 days before any kind of data is stolen and exfiltrated. So it takes 7 days. Why? The malicious user is taking its time. He's got no reason to rush, no reason to create more alerts. He can stay there stealthy and take its time because he won't be detected before. So this is something that we really need to be aware of. Not only distributed denial of services attacks are becoming larger, more complex, and frequent for everybody, but as well everybody is facing this type of statistics and this type of challenges. It is a big problem today that we are all trying to fix. So how did we get there? Well, mostly we spent about 20 years building fortresses and castles around our network. First, we did that on the network, and then we moved on to the end user, to the endpoint. And it's only within the last 5 years that we've realized that there is no more perimeter. With mobility, remote users, cloud, software as a service, now your user is your perimeter. The perimeter is dead. And we've obviously made a lot of investment into those proactive protection devices that are necessary. They still need to be there, but we've investing too much time and effort into those, not thinking about the end user. We've made our systems and networks more secure. We've hardened them. We've done penetration testing, risk and compliance assessment, but we've never thought of the fact that anyway, those perimeter security and everything in place will actually be breached at any time. So we haven't focused on the user, and we haven't focused on as well in changing the way we handle and process those incidents. There's been negligible efforts in incident response planning and handling. And if you look at the worldwide infrastructure security report, the numbers here, I'm sorry, are too small for you to read, but last year there's been only a 2% increase in terms of organization increasing the size of their incident handlers, of the incident handling team. So the efforts that we're putting there are negligible. So this slide here will give two perspectives. On the left-hand side, you can see the verticals that our service providers are seeing being targeted by distributed denial of services attack. And on the right, you can see the enterprises themselves. And here, what we can see is that no one is spared. It doesn't matter if you're not a financial organization, and it doesn't matter if you're not a government organization. any kind of vertical can be a target of a DDoS and cybersecurity attack. As you can see here on the right, we've seen that our enterprise customers, 42% of those reported to us that they had experienced at least one DDoS attack last year. And this is just the generic number. If you look at the details at the bottom, actually it was over half of government organizations and 63% of financial services organizations that were targets of DDoS attack. And the important thing to remember as well is the frequency and the scale of those. Those are basically on average going up by 44%. Probably year after year, they nearly double. So, or half double. So this is a problem that is has an impact on any kind of organization. And if we look at the advanced threat landscape, it is very similar. If you remember, when we talk about DDoS and the fact that most organizations still today believe that this is not something that will happen to them, those big numbers, everything we see in the news are too big and are definitely not something they will see. Most of those organizations as well think that this is not something that they need to be concerned about. They think that first will not be target of those attacks, and as we've seen in the previous slide, this is not the case. And then they think of, well, all those intrusions that we saw in the news, those big ones, are only targeting those financials and retail companies, and they must not be really well prepared, they must not have the right security tools in place or the right security team. And actually, that's not the case. If you look at two of the most well-prepared sectors worldwide, which is retail and finance, you can see that they're doing a little bit better at retail by 2 days than the rest of the organization. And obviously, financial services organizations are leading the pack here, which are less than 100 days. But those numbers are still not very good. 80 days, 98 days to detect an attack if you're a banking organization or a financial organization is far too long for you to be able to mitigate. So those numbers are what are called mean time to identify, meaning it's the dwell time that I've talked before. It's the time then when you detect an incident, but when actually this incident first happened. So that's 98 days in the financial organizations and 198 days in retail. The second number here at the right is about the time that it takes to contain. So mean time to contain is the time that it takes an organization. So once the incident has been identified and scoped, is the time it takes to basically block any kind of activities from this malicious user. It's either revoking rights, stopping the user from being able to connect externally, basically containing the intrusion so that no harmful behavior will happen. And it takes as well a long, long time. And these are the numbers that we have to deal with today, and those are the numbers that we need to improve, because otherwise we won't see the end of those big intrusion and breaches that we see in the news, and we will carry on doing, having this kind of alert fatigue that we're seeing more and more. Paradoxically, is a lot of end users are getting bored of hearing about this bank or this big organization that has been breached and their emails or credit card details have been disclosed. And we need to change basically our mind. We need to change the mentality, and we need to look at protecting our networks in different ways. And over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of people advocating for a change of mindset, let's say, where it's not about if you're going to get breached. And it's not even about when you're going to get breached. You're going to get breached. You better protect your network, considering that you are actually breached right now. And the latest trend is to actually start looking at IT security from being constantly under cyber attack and not relying on your proactive devices and all the tools that you have in place to protect your network. So it's almost impossible today to talk about DDoS attacks without talking a little bit about IoT botnets. And I'm not going to talk too much about those because one of my colleagues is talking about them tomorrow. But here what you see on this screen is a heat map. Is the heat map of the impact of the Dyn attack that we saw last year. And what you see here on the screen, so Dyn, for all of you, I'm sure you know, but Dyn is a very famous registrar, and a lot of Fortune 100 companies around the world use their services for DNS. And Dyn last year was hit by a very large DDoS attack. And what you see here is the North American population, the people in North America that suddenly couldn't resolve domains, names of services, and couldn't basically use any kind of services from those Fortune 100 companies. The very conservative estimate is about 10 million of people that were suddenly unable to use the internet and use the services. You're talking about Facebook, you're talking about big, large organizations. But a more accurate estimation is about 100 million people. And one of the good aspects of this is that it brought back home the concept of distributed denial of services. Prior to gamers and gaming, DDoS was always thought of as a business issue as opposed to an end user issue. But we can see that the impact now, the collateral damages, the knock-on effects that such big weaponized DDoS for our services could do is just bring a whole country nearly offline for a certain amount of time. So what we're seeing there is this traffic coming from DDoS IoT botnets, and actually weaponized IoT botnets. So this is not something really new that we're seeing. Last year, what we saw, and actually going back to about 4 or 5 years, let's say IoT botnets are not something really new. It's something that we've been looking at for about 4 or 5 years. But initially, what we saw was a large number of compromised ADSL routers and cable modems that were used to send a large amount of traffic or reflect traffic to carry out DDoS attack. But last year what we saw, and that's what happened with Dyn, and that's what happened with Krebs for those attacks that were north of 0.5 terabit per second, is that a very, very large number of CCTV and DVR systems were compromised and incorporated into DDoS, IoT botnet, to carry out those large weaponized attacks. And this is actually not something that is very unfamiliar to us, or at least not to me. Maybe to some of you, yes, because you're probably a lot younger than I am. But if you go back to the days of the late 19th and early of this century, the first wave of DDoS attacks that we saw were very, very similar. But those were end-user workstations that were compromised and used in kind of campaigns as botnets to send a large amount of traffic. Those end-user workstations were not configured, or those users, the owners of those systems, didn't know much about security. They had no security system installed. They were not hardened. They were vulnerable, either the operating system or the application running on those machines. And they were compromised and bought into large networks of compromised machines to send DDoS attacks. And what we're seeing now, it's very, very similar, except that they're not end-user workstations. They are IoT devices. And will we see this changing very soon? My answer is that not soon. I believe we will see an improvement of the situation. I don't believe that the industry will carry on doing what it's doing right now, is that leaving all those IoT devices in the wild with no security and no standards. I think somewhere, we will do something about it, and we'll have a lot less vulnerabilities in those systems. But for the right time right now, I don't think we're going to see any changing very soon, for many reasons. So WannaCry here, as you can see the screenshot, though WannaCry was not targeting Windows XP, and WannaCry was probably something that went out of hands as a mistake, was actually not something that was really thought of. WannaCry came and it made us realize that we are still reliant on a lot of old end-of-life system for which there is no more security updates. And this is a big problem, and I don't think we're going to see anything changing soon around that. So considering that we have still a very huge amount of zero-day available. So zero-day, for you that might not know what it is, 0 days are vulnerabilities in operating systems, mostly, sometimes in applications, for which there is no fix. There is no patch, there is no way to correct it. And those 0 day attract a lot of attention. They're used everywhere around the world by malicious organizations, by government as well sponsored entities for doing a lot of bad things. And there's still a huge amount of those around. And the case of the shadow broker leak that basically disclosed to everybody the NSA Eternal Blue exploit that has been used for WannaCry, for instance. But to give you some idea as well, it's well known that there are some big APT groups out there that are going through 2 0 day a month. So I don't think from a cybersecurity threat landscape, we're going to see things improving very, very rapidly. And the last reason as well is more to do with the fact that every day it seems like we're waking up again, grind out security day, to the same day again and again. Why? Today, there's 1 million cybersecurity shortfall in terms of staff, in terms of experts. And this is not going to actually improve at all. The forecast is for 1.5 million by 2019. So the scale is tipped not in our favor. We don't have enough people to work on those, and we don't see that the market is going to improve very, very soon. So it is a little bit scary, or let's say at least it's something that we all need to be concerned and realize that it is really happening and we really need to do something about it, change our mindset. Going back to the IoT, those IoT devices are obviously network connected, otherwise they wouldn't be called like this, but as well, they're small devices that you can find in coffee makers, in toys and everywhere, CCTVs, DVRs, and those come most of the time with limited onboard management capabilities. So obviously the only way that you could just access to them and configure them, modify them, would be through an internet connection. So they need to have internet connection. But unfortunately, most of those come with hard-coded username and password. They have unnecessary services and vulnerable services turned on by default. They do have flaws in their system, so they're vulnerable. There is no way or no process available to upgrade or fix those devices. And as well, most of the time, they are deployed without realizing they're there, and nobody has any inventory or doesn't know where they are and what they're doing. So we've got this huge pool, the sheer amount of IoT devices out there, vulnerable, and they're being used, compromised into different kind of IoT botnets. Mirai is one of them, and is the one that was against Krebs, the journalist, OVH, a service provider, hosting provider in France, and Dyn last year. The 1.2 terabit per second is not confirmed at all, but that's the numbers that is circulating. So, like I said as well for the cyber threat security landscape, we don't think that's going to change very, very soon for the reason that today there's already 6 billion of IoT devices worldwide, and there's 5.5 million that are added every day. And the projections for 2020 is about 20 to 30 billion of IoT devices. There's soon going to be more IoT devices. Actually, there is soon more IoT devices than there are people on the planet. So the sheer amount and volume of those is enormous. So we really need to change the way we look at those problems. A little screenshot of Mirai, but my colleague will talk a lot more about Mirai tomorrow. So there is a lot of activities going on there. And Arbor is actually investing a lot of time, effort, and research into tracking, monitoring those botnets, and infiltrating them as well. We do try to participate in those botnets and try to figure out what are the changes, what are the attack vectors that are used, so that we could better understand the landscape and how to protect against those. And obviously, there's been a lot of media coverage last year about the attacks against CREB, Dyn, OVH. But what we're seeing is that it's just the tip of the iceberg. Last year, from November until February of this year, we actually tracked 11,000 IoT botnet attack, 11,000. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those in the near future, and this is a really growing concern, and IoT devices needs to be looked at very, very seriously. So I don't want to leave you with this very dark vision of the internet world today. So I want to tell you a little bit, so that's the shameless plug of Arbor, telling you what we do. We do offer solutions as others in order to help you detect and mitigate DDoS and cybersecurity attacks. And the first solution that we have is our multi-layer DDoS protection service. So the Arbor multi-layer detection solution is a multi-layer system that is comprised of both a cloud-based or hosted piece of mitigation service and an on-premise mitigation product. So the cloud-based hosted mitigation service is there to take care of the volumetric attacks, the big ones. This is where in the cloud, where there's significant bandwidth available, and this is where it's the best place to be able to filter out the bad traffic and forward on the good one. But the on-premises component is there to proactively react to a DDoS attack and block those application layer attacks that could have an impact on your internal services. And if the on-premises solution platform start to see that the attacks are escalating, it could automatically, using what we call cloud signaling, contact the cloud-based hosted provider for help. And then the traffic could then be redirected there to be scrubbed and filtered in the cloud. This is usually a two-tier layer approach, but you can add a third one as well. And the third layer that is available is by using Arbor's carrier agnostic network. It's basically, an insurance policy for service providers or hosted providers that when they see their mitigation capability being exhausted because the attack is really too big, they can ask help from us, from Arbor, and then we can redirect the traffic to our very large capacity scrubbing centers to help them to mitigate those very, very large attacks. So this is the DDoS multi-layer Arbor solution, and the other solution that we have against advanced threat is a solution which is what people usually call network security monitoring or network behavioral analysis. This is a solution that leverages your traffic, your internal traffic, both from net flow but as well from packet analysis, that is used in conjunction with threat intelligence from Arbor. And we use all of these to detect something going on, something malicious on your network. And we provide the workflows to help you basically investigate and an incident in order to contain it as fast as possible. So the system has been built to provide you with instant or near instant detection and at the speed of light of incident, and the workflows have been built to really help speed up the work of incident handlers to reduce the containment time and try to squeeze dramatically the dwell time that we've seen, that is about 6 months. So we haven't lost the battle. The battle is not in our favor now, but let's not call it defeat yet. There are solutions around, and we just need to change the way we look at the problem. We need to change as well our mindset, and we can give it a go. That's, I believe, all I have for you right now for today. Thank you very much again for your time, and we'll be around for the rest of the conference. We've got some brochures. Feel free to come and speak with us at any time. And if you've got questions, I'd be more than happy to take them now and answer any questions that you may have. No, then. ขอบคุณมากครับ
Thank you very much to Mr. Philippe Alcoy, a security technologist at APAC Arbor, on the topic of the new threat landscape. The stakes have changed. เอาละครับตอนนี้ก็ถึงเวลาที่เราจะพักเบรกกันแล้วนะครับแต่ก่อนที่ทุกท่านจะไปพักเบรกแล้วก็รับประทานอาหารว่างนะครับเรามีแบบสอบถามที่ทุกท่านจะได้รับนะครับในกระเป๋าผ้ารบกวนกรอกแบบสอบถามด้วยนะครับแล้วก็เอาไปที่โต๊ะลงทะเบียนด้านหน้าเพื่อที่จะรับคูปองนะครับซึ่งคูปองนี้ทุกท่านสามารถรับเพื่อที่จะมีสิทธิ์ลุ้นรับของรางวัลของเรานะครับซึ่งในรอบแรกเราจะแจกถึง3รางวัลเลยก็เป็น Flash Drive Wristband ถึง2รางวัลแล้วก็รางวัลใหญ่1รางวัลนั่นก็คือหูฟังไร้สายแบบ Bluetooth นั่นเองนะครับอย่าลืมกรอกแบบสอบถามแล้วก็เอาไปที่โต๊ะลงทะเบียนเพื่อรับคูปองนะครับแล้วเราจะพักกัน